Keeping accurate and reliable records, whether kept on paper or electronically, in pharmaceutical manufacturing industries is essential for every manufacturer. Each year, firms in pharmaceutical, biotech, blood processing, and nutraceutical manufacturing experience a high number of documentation errors. Correcting these errors takes much time and costs companies much money in investigations, corrections, and subsequent report writing. What is expected of each employee in completing documentation, how to correct documentation errors, and specific prohibited practices is the focus of this program. My name is Allan Dewes, and this is a SkillsPlus International online learning program. This program has been titled Overcoming the Documentation Nightmare. So titled because the errors seen cause so many employees and companies a nightmare in efforts to maintain compliance with current good manufacturing practice. To overcome the documentation nightmare, it is important to appreciate the seriousness of incorrectly documenting work. So this program examines the common observations issued by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, to firms for incorrect documentation practices. To overcome the documentation nightmare, it is important to recognize and use proper documentation practices for completing all records and reports, whether paper-based or electronic. So this program examines the proper documentation rules and document handling practices. Let's begin. In further interviews with quality assurance representatives, they were asked how they overcame the documentation nightmares so often triggering GMP compliance issues. All reported a variety of common documentation practices. Of those practices, the following are the most common. Enter detailed, complete, and accurate information. Entering information into documents creates the product history. That history must be detailed, complete, and accurately recorded. Use permanent indelible ink in a company-approved color. Typically, companies use blue or black ink because those colors photocopy better than any other colors. Think of the nightmare caused by, for example, laboratory personnel who used red ink for recording calculations in laboratory notebooks. The data was not reproducible, and the FDA cited the firm for not having their required documentation. Firms overcome that nightmare by always using black or blue permanent ink. Writing must be neat and legible. Imagine the nightmare caused by more than one interpretation for a single entry. For instance, imagine seeing a poorly written number 6 and not knowing if it was perhaps a 0. This causes questionable documentation, confusion in product specifications, and much lost production time. Firms overcome this nightmare with neat and legible entries. All employees performing a task must enter their signature or initials as directed and date of the entry. This means that when more than one person performs a task, then all persons must sign for that task. For documentation review purposes, this identifies all parties involved in the event a problem should arise. Imagine the nightmare of not knowing all who performed a task or when. In one organization, only one employee signed for work performed, even though it was performed by 2 people. The one who didn't sign the document actually made mistakes. If the employee who made the mistakes hadn't acknowledged their error, the employee who signed for the work would have been held responsible. Firms overcome this nightmare by assuring all employees involved in a task sign or initial and date their work. When you sign your name to a GMP document, your signature means that you performed the work correctly and that it is correct according to procedure. You have signed your name to a legal document. limit abbreviations to those that are commonly known. Many firms have a procedure listing the abbreviations and acronyms approved for use. The use of all abbreviations and acronyms must be consistent. It is urgent that everyone make timely documentation entries. That means work is completed and signed at the time the work is performed. Imagine the nightmare of not being able to recall data from my process because it was not entered into a record as the work was performed. Firms overcome this nightmare with real-time documentation documenting our work as the work is being performed. This helps to assure that the document is completed correctly the first time and that no information has been left out or a step forgotten. Imagine the nightmare caused by a production operator who was called away during the performance of a time-based in-process test. The operator left without recording and signing for their work. Upon the operator's return, the operator had no reliable data to enter into the batch record. A detailed investigation was conducted, and it was determined that the process was out of specification for that entire time interval. A portion of the batch had to be rejected. Firms overcome this nightmare through real-time documentation.
Thank you for watching our preview. If you would like a free preview of the entire program, to decide if this program is suitable for your training need, please call Allan at the number on your screen. He can quickly and easily arrange for you to preview this exciting new course. Thank you again.